too small, I got big dreams.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Pun Fun, where we have fun with the puns. My name is Ryan, and today we definitely have a treat for you. We're here in the studios with an exclusive interview with Boum. Hey Boum, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How about you?
I am great, and before we get started, happy birthday, by the way. Today is her birthday, or whenever you see this video, the 8th of March is her birthday. So happy birthday to you.
Thank
And
you.
also happy Women's Day. I mean, hey, what a great, collaboration, I guess, of days all together. And who can forget your birthday, right? I mean,
I don't know. I kind of get people are not talking about my birthday usually. They have other things to say about March 8th. That's fine.
Man.
That's fine.
So we're here with Boum, so an incredible illustrator, but even a more incredible local independent comic artist. So we met, I think, in November, and I've been on your Instagram. I've seen some of your posts. So I mean, your comics obviously speak about your life, the before, the now. I don't think you've ever done the after, right? It's always been like in the now, but never beyond.
Well, for this series actually, but because the ones you're seeing on Instagram and social media right now are actually reposts. Because I ran a webcomic from I want to say February 2011 to February 2020.
Wow.
And it was a journal comic, so it was all true stories. Whenever something funny or cute or happened, I would write it down and make a comic strip out of it. And along the way, I had kids, so that's yeah.
Exactly.
So that's the main thing. But I ended Boumeries in 2020 because I wanted to move on to other projects. So right now I'm working on a fiction. I also published a few books on the side while working on Boumeries as well throughout the years.
That's amazing. And exactly. So when I did get to see your collection, so I was able to, for example, procure volume 4, and even online you still have everything up as well, so you can still go ahead and see the archive that she's put up. So you can definitely check her link. I'll have it in the description below, so you want to catch up for sure. What is great is that, like she said, it's a breathing diary, if you will. It's kind of like everything that you've lived through and what you're experiencing. And this one is where kid number 1 kicks in. And it's just a funny story. And I don't have a kid of my own at the moment, but I mean, you can definitely relate. And what's fun is that even if the story, sometimes there's a twist, there's puns, there's always a nice, twist or a funny ending to it. So you're definitely going to enjoy it. So Boum, on your side, so obviously Boum, I know this is your artist name. Is this your actual name or or is this just your alias?
It's a pseudonym I chose long ago. Actually, my name is Samantha. Okay, and I had this really long French name that gets mispronounced even in French. So anyway, but reading comics as a kid, I read a lot of Belgian French comics where a lot of people used to have pseudonyms. I don't think it's as popular now as it was then.
Right.
But anyway, I've always wanted kind of to have an artist name of sorts, but the Boum part is actually a nickname that I had when I was about 2 or 3 years old. People in my family, they would call me Sam Boum. So I just, when the time came to, I think it was when I registered for a DeviantArt page in like 2001 or 2002.
Wow. Okay.
I decided to just cut the real part of my name out, because back then when you were like 13, 14, we weren't allowed to use our real names on the internet.
No,
It's changed
exactly.
now.
Yeah.
But back then you had to be careful about that. So I just, removed the real part out of it. And then I had this short, unisex, easy to remember 4-letter pseudonym. And I kept it. I like the sound of it.
By the way, people, obviously I've known her art before, and I was passing through the artist alley, and the thing that caught my eye obviously was a pun. So this was a sticker that I had procured. I don't know if you guys see it, but it's Chai Guy,
Shy
instead of
guy,
a
yeah.
Shy Guy. And I was like, there you go. And that just, had this conversation going, and here we are today. So, I mean, we always have fun with puns, right? And so for the many, so how many years would you say you've been drawing then, or doodling or sketching?
Forever. I picked up a pencil as soon as I could. I was probably 2 or 3.
Wow. Okay.
And I was like, I was a precocious child when it comes to drawing. I think when I look at drawings from when I was very little, they're very good, and then I got less good as I grew older. Like, I've always thought I was always like the best at drawing during elementary school because that's all I did. That's all. I didn't have a lot of friends because I would draw all the time. But then as I grew older, and especially when I got into college, where suddenly I was studying traditional animation, and then so everyone was good at drawing. So then it hit me like, oh, I am not that good actually. Now that I am with people like me, I am not that good. So I worked really hard.
Wow.
I really enjoyed the experience too, but it was really, really motivating to have a bunch of really talented people surrounding me. While elementary school, I was pretty much like the child who draws. That was me. In high school, I met, she wasn't even in my school, but I met Cab, who is also a cartoonist from Montreal.
Yeah.
Now, she wasn't then, but now she is. We became best friends. We weren't at the same school. We met because our sisters were friends.
Wow.
And then we found out that each other could draw. And then I think it was just me and her trying to
like compete against each other,
and also compete again. Yeah, well, it was healthy because we both enjoyed what the other one did, and
Absolutely.
we would both
That's
write
cool.
stories and draw and try to make comics, but we weren't really good back then. It got better later on. So I drew all my life. I was set on having a career as an artist at about 6-7 years old.
Wow.
I knew I was going to get into that. I kind of hesitated between animation and comics throughout the years. I did some comics as a child. I was part of the school newspaper in 4th or 5th grade.
Wow.
And I remember making comics for it that were published in the school newspaper.
That's crazy.
It wasn't like...
No, that's still pretty cool. I mean, anybody who may have kept it or like archived that, like, is like, hey, look at you now. Imagine, like, could you imagine a show where you go to and somebody brings it up and it's like, hey, can you sign this for me? I can only imagine the reaction, or like the well, first of all, the nostalgia, but just like seeing this like slap from the past, come back. I mean, I don't know how I feel.
But now I never thought of that. I kind of wish I wish it would happen. I would be mortified and also very impressed. Because I remember parts of it. There's probably comics in there that I have no recollection of, and they're probably terrible, but I would be curious to see them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, from ever since to now, I remember sometimes I'll pick up whatever it may be, like an old homework that I may have filed somewhere, and I'm like, oh my God, this is how I wrote. Or so I can imagine your even your art process, what, like you said, what you thought was amazing. Well, you as an adult, having this experience, having, the tools now, and having drawn so much, seeing something, from back when, I can only imagine your reaction. I mean, hey, fingers crossed. If anybody out there, you guys may have, a piece of history, definitely want to head it towards
the Maisonneuve school newspaper from like 94, 95.
Hey, who knows? Maybe the school might have it archived. I mean,
I should. They probably don't, but I should go check. I think the school is like closed for renovations right now, so I can't even go.
Well, I mean, food for thoughts. And so you said from 6 years old that you knew you were, driven. This is what you wanted to do. When did you knew that this was no longer a hobby, but this was something that you want to do for your life? Like, what was it that breaking point? You're like, you know what? This is what I want to do. Was it internal? Was something that you saw? Was this inspired by an event?
I think I was 6 or 7, maybe 7.
Okay.
And I went to Disney World with my grandmother and my aunt and uncle, I think. Yes. And back then, it doesn't exist anymore because I've gone back since and I tried to find it, but it's not there. There used to be an animation studio in the Disney park.
Okay, wow.
And the point was you could get in and watch the animators at work, kind of like going into a strange aquarium with people working. I remember walking in the corridor and looking down at animation tables with people working, and I think they were working on Aladdin back then, if I remember correctly.
That's crazy. You saw it like in the works. That's amazing.
Yes. And I know for sure that this studio would only do snippets, like certain scenes of the movies. I know for sure that the entirety of Lilo and Stitch was made there. And then the 3D CGI era began and they closed it. And now Disney doesn't ever really do 2D anymore.
Wow.
So I went there, I saw the animators, and I thought that was the coolest thing.
That's
and
crazy.
I walked out and I said, I am going to do that. So I was in first grade or something like that. Yeah.
That's amazing. So that means you may have met like Chris Sanders at a younger age while he was doing Lilo and Stitch, and
I didn't get to talk to him.
That's amazing.
But I saw a bunch of animators at work. I have, faint memories of it. Maybe if I Google it, I'll find photos and it's gonna, spark back.
Oh yeah, for sure. If I'm able to find any kind of clip or anything, I'll definitely put it up. That's so cool. And I wish they would do more of this, even now today, because like we know it's kind of like the how-to, that show where they show you how things are made. And you're like, okay, that's cool. You get this like really, distant approach of how to view something, but watching it being done in front of you, I think that's where the inspiration really thrives. It's kind of like you had your foot in it without actually being right next to them. So I think that was very cool. It's
interesting. I thought it was interesting when you're outside of it. I'm not sure how it felt for the animators themselves to be some sort of
I can imagine
constant,
having that head behind or like kids like knocking on the window.
So I think it's cool, but I still think it's strange. And I'm not sure I would like to be working with people watching over me all the time.
For whatever reason, it reminds me of Jurassic Park. When they do that tour and you see the scene where they're like the scientists are like working on the DNA, and I always thought to myself, like, how would you work knowing that every 2 hours there's going to be this tour guide? And I was like, hey, I guess Disney made it work, and I'm glad they did, because hey, there you are today. It definitely gave you inspiration. So what would you say is your earliest influences in this domain, so going into comic books or comics?
My parents had comics at home, but only the European bande dessinée types,
like
Tintin, Asterix,
right,
Spirou,
Garfield,
and then I think every child has read some Garfields at some point. And
absolutely,
it's strange because reading Garfield today, it's not very good. Is it? I understand that he had to draw a lot of them, and not all of them can be good, because when you're a syndicated comic in the newspaper and you have to have this really intense output and churn out comics day after day after day, there's going to be one really good one every once in a while, and then the rest of the day you're kind of like, I have to send a comic and I have 1 hour left, so they're not all good, and they're also really not aimed at children. Kids will read this and not get the joke at all, but then they'll be like, funny chimes, I don't mind. And then they'll keep reading, because I have an 8-year-old daughter and she likes them. But every strip she's like, Mom, can you explain this joke to me? And then I'm like, I can't. It's not good, and you won't find it funny because you're too young.
Oh my god.
I want to say 10 or 11. My aunt subscribed me to Spirou magazine, which is a comics magazine that is delivered to your door weekly.
Wow.
So it's once a week.
Wow.
That's it's about
commitment.
50 pages. 50 pages of comics every week. It's, it's a dream.
And it was only Spirou, or was it a medley of different comics? Okay.
It's by a publisher, by Dupuis. So anything that's published by Dupuis can potentially end up in the magazine.
Okay,
so there's short forms, gag comics, And then there's also long forms that are like to be continued. If you wait, they have a few pages, and then next week you have another few pages. So I was subscribed to that for a few years. It's I don't know how much it is now, but even back then I remember that it was pretty expensive.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And European magazine too. So you got like, I don't know the difference. I don't know. I think I got it on time, but it was super expensive to get. So it was a conjoined gifts from several people. It was like my Christmas gift. It wasn't like this year you get this and next year it was no, you get this and then you get nothing else for the rest of the year. Because I got like comics in my mailbox every week.
I mean, which is amazing, by the way. Like,
and then in that, I think it might have been the very first magazine that I got, and I got lucky because this one was like a special 70-page edition of authors and their secrets. So everyone was like, I use this kind of paper, this kind of pen, this kind of technique to draw comics, this kind of technique to write comics. So I had this thing in my hands, and then I was 10, I was like, I only want dash paper for watercolor, and which I never got because it was crazy expensive, and who's going to give like really expensive watercolor paper to a 10-year-old who's going to bail out 10 seconds after starting, because watercolor is really hard.
Oh, absolutely.
So anyway, cool. so that was a good source of a good resource actually to look back. I should find it and read it again, see what I think about it now that I'm doing this as a living.
Yeah, absolutely. See maybe if there was any elements that you may have remembered that you may have been using from ever since too.
There's something that I learned there that I never forgot, which is the turn page rule, that whenever you have on the page on the right when you open a book, the page on the right, the last panel, always has to be some sort of cliffhanger. You have to get your reader to turn the page. Wow. And that's where I learned it. It doesn't have to be like this moment, but every time you have to kind of
pique the curiosity enough for them to
so
keep
they
going.
turn the page.
Yeah.
So that's the bottom right panel every time. And then I read that in the magazine, that one magazine, and I never forgot about it. It's a golden rule of comics making. Wow. If you make comics and you've been doing it for a long time, usually you know this. That's but I learned it at like 10, and then I remembered it.
So talking about your art, talking about your process, so for your comics, I know sometimes people will come up with stories and they'll have storyboards, and I would suppose you do too, but because it's related also to your life, how do you come up with the process of getting it together? Like, how do you do you start off somewhere and then the idea comes afterwards, or do you go ahead and know your story, know like every panel, do you visualize it? What is your process in creating these comics?
Well, it depends. Right now, like the book I'm working on, I did a full script, and my script was very detailed. Like I would be like, I divided it into pages, and I always do my script in columns. So I have like page left, page right, always. Okay.
Cool.
It helps me. I'm visual. I'm a visual person, and I need to, even if it's just words on the page, I still need to be like, okay, on this page, this is going to happen, and this page, this is going to happen, and then small cliffhanger on the right page, and then I made storyboard, so thumbnails. The storyboard really rough in Photoshop, because I used to do them on paper, but for this one I decided to do the storyboard on like life size, like the real book size, with text, so then I could just draw over it for the pencils, and I have already all my panels.
Absolutely.
So then
Saves the whole
storyboard,
step,
pencil, ink. So it's more traditional. But for Boumeries, what would happen is that since they're all true stories, with time I got better and better at being like, this is really a funny situation I'm in. I'm gonna write it down. So I would grab my phone, write it down, and then I would immediately know what I would do with 4 panels, like how I would tell the story. Sometimes I would summarize it slightly, so the timing is not always like true to life, but most of it is. Sometimes there's context. Okay, so the conversation didn't really happen in that exact way before, readability, I'm gonna move things around, but it's mostly true. So I wouldn't do any storyboards or thumbnails at all. I would jump directly to the pencils.
Okay.
So I had this template, which is actually on my table. The template is there like permanently.
Right.
It's saved there. Even if I don't do really, I haven't done Boumeries in a while. I did actually do Boumeries strips on February 1st because it was Hourly Comic Day, which is a day where cartoonists around the world make one comic every hour. There are
That was amazing, by the way. Thank you for that. That it was.
Thanks.
I don't know. Like I always figured people had this done like maybe months ahead of time, or I wasn't sure how, but like really, every hour on the hour there was another comic, and I was like, hey, this it was a gift for us. It was really great.
Always on the hour. I've had better years. Some years I've cheated slightly because February 1st would be like, I don't know, on the day where my husband would be gone and I would have the kids with me, and like this is going to be impossible. So what
it's right after the holidays too, right? So it's so like rushed.
So I would sometimes find a day where I would be able to work and not have the kids just, preventing me from drawing. But then I would do the same thing. I would still write down, like every hour something happens, I would write it down, make a comic about it, and then on February 1st I would just post them one every hour. But that still meant that I did the exercise the right way, just another day. Boumeries is not meant to be neat. It's meant to be fastly drawn, because on it, like, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do the comic for so long. The reason why it lasted almost 10 years, it's because it was quick to do, readable, short and sweet, no color because I don't have the time. And then the formula worked, and which is why I kept going for so long. And then that's it. So yeah, no script, no storyboard, and I would do it in English first, which is strange because I'm a francophone and my life mostly happens in French.
Okay.
But just hearing the translation in my head, as soon as it happened, I would be trying to word it out in English first, just to be like, oh, does that joke work in both languages?
Right. That is true.
Like expressions. There's a very good example of that. With one strip that's not in volume 4, so you might not have read it. It's on the later side, maybe in volume 9 or 10.
Okay.
Where I would take my youngest daughter to the library.
Okay.
Which in French is bibliothèque.
Yeah.
So I would say, on va à la bibliothèque, and she would say bibliothèque. She wouldn't say bibliothèque, she would say bibliothèque. So that's a word that doesn't exist that has the word baby in it, right?
Right.
But that worked in English too, because then she would just say, lie baby. Because when we got there, the first thing she said when she saw the books, she just looked at me and said, where are the babies? Because she was expecting to see a bunch of babies, because she heard...
Exactly, on shelves.
So bibliothèque and lie baby, they worked. So as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, it works in English. Because there's a bunch of jokes I couldn't make in both languages because the joke would be lost in translation. So there's, a few Boumeries that I would have been French only, and which I didn't want to do because I've always tried to make both versions for everyone on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. That's so if you guys were to go on her Instagram page, and I think daily, if I'm mistaken, you will have
on weekdays. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes. Well, yeah. On weekdays.
I'm off on the weekends,
which is completely fine. But yes, on a daily, I would have my dose of Boumerie, and you would have the English one, and if you swipe, you would have your French one. And I would read both, because sometimes I'm like, it's exactly that. Sometimes you'll have, let's say, movies that are in English and they'll be translated. Sometimes the jokes don't really translate that well. So I'm like, or even vice versa. Sometimes it's French and you put it into English and you're kind of like, eh. But here it actually works almost every other time, or actually every time. So again, that's a skill on its own to be able to play with the words. And even if the storyboard or the words aren't exactly word for word or verbatim, as they say, exactly the same, it works. The joke comes through, you understand exactly what's going on, the context is always there anyways. But yeah, kudos to you for having that setting, having that concept, but also, especially Montreal where everything is, English, French, but making it work regardless. So yeah, very well done.
Thanks. I think it's because I chose every comic because I could make both versions. Because like you said, a bunch of funny stories I couldn't make in English. So I would just write a Facebook status with them. And now I'm reminded like every year, you have a memory from today. And that's, funny story that I couldn't translate.
Right.
But
again, very great concept, and I love the way that you portray it in your books. It's not, it doesn't seem boxed in, like you said. The couple life. You didn't seem like you're on a sitcom where there was always these four walls. It always carried on. It always had a nice flow. Even the way you divide your book, because it's not just like the Garfields. It just keeps going and going and going and going. Whereas in here you would have sections of your life, sections of what's happening, sections of like where it's going with the progression. So I definitely do appreciate that, the way how it's put, because it's kind of like a new chapter is beginning within that bigger chapter, within that stage, if you will. Yeah, I
think that's the first time someone's pointed that out to me, and I made books for like 10 years.
Oh wow.
Interestingly, in the French version omnibus that was published by Glénat Québec, they got rid of that.
Recently you had a promotion, so I was able to get a lot of prints. So one of the prints in particular that I was able to get that we haven't gotten yet, which is fine. I mean, it's I think it's a cover for volume 10, which is kind of like a convention. Oh, it was me. It's like a convention that's going on with like, it's kind of like a Where's Waldo, so Où est Charlie, where things microscopic, and you kind of like get this glance. How do you start something like that? That it's just it was beyond me. I was looking at it and I was like, well, I love these. I've always enjoyed these, and I was like, to see this, but like at a adult scale, if you will, like stuff that is current and then within the stuff I'm liking now. Stroke of genius. I mean, that was one of the, I think, main reasons why I was like, I gotta have it. But how do you get that going? How do you get that even started?
Oh man, it was something.
Oh yeah.
What sparked the idea is because I don't know, maybe that's gonna sound pretentious, but every time I would put a new Boumeries book out, people would be like, oh, this is your best cover yet. This is your best cover yet.
Okay, wow.
And I would be like, oh, awesome. No pressure for the next one, But that would be like steady every year. People would be, never once had it, I had to happen something like, oh, I like this cover, but I like the previous one better. Everyone was always like, oh, this one is better than the last one. And then for volume 9, I had this really, really dumb idea of drawing my family and I as a Renaissance painting, kind of with like the frilly colors, and
wow,
I couldn't do the painterly style, so I hired one of my good friends to do it because I knew he could. So I just sent him like a rough drawing and he painted over it, and it's masterful. It's the strangest thing because we had these like really blank faces and dot eyes, but the eyes are really super shiny. He worked really hard like to have some light reflection on the dots, and it's so good that when he sent me the finished version, you're gonna show it.
No, I will. I will post it up. Absolutely.
It's a great cover. I don't feel like I did it at all, like, because it was out of my hands. He painted it, he chose the colors and everything. I just sent him references like, have fun, I'm paying you, whatever you.
Exactly. That's amazing.
So I felt like to beat that one, I had to go like way beyond. I was like, what?
This was,
and possibly be more impressive than this one. Because this one, he knocked it out of the park. It was amazing. So I was like, I think I have no choice and I have to do something really intricate and really insane. Oh, I have my cat scared for
That's fine.
So I had this idea, which ironically, please don't do this. Ironically, I worked on this, and then just as I finished it, the pandemic hit and we were all in lockdown and we had no events for like 2 years.
Right.
So it's the irony. So how I did it is I got an isometric grid, and then I just built from there. I made one tiny table with a tablecloth, and then I would just paste hundreds of them all over the page, and then rotate some, whatever.
Mhm.
And then tiny chairs, and then tiny banners, tiny boxes. So all the same. There's a lot of repetition in it, but that's black and white. Everything in
Right.
black and white. Then I painstakingly, I don't think I penciled. I went straight to digital ink because
Okay.
there was no way I could do this on paper. Are you kidding? So it's all digital. And then I drew every character by hand.
Wow.
And then I
Wow.
just went back and colored the whole thing with a fairly limited palette. I tried not to go overboard with colors because it would have been,
Too much, I think. Anyways, I mean,
nauseating. So I went kind of limited. It was a bit of hit or miss, like, oh, this color doesn't work. And then I had friends look at it to help me because it was not my usual cup of tea. I also tried to be as diverse as I could. So there's, people in wheelchairs. There's, people of color.
Mhm.
I tried to do. I did my best.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It
Um,
really seemed like an actual Comic-Con. You had everybody of anyone actually in it, and it was that. I think that's what also, like you said, it had been a while. We had not been to a show, so seeing it really, struck a chord. But also, like just the magnitude of it, I was like, it's crazy. I mean, like you said, I didn't even think you would have done every single character, or it was,
no, not one character repeats. They're
Wow.
all hand drawn, and there's a bunch of cameos in there. So there's a bunch of real people, and I am in there, and my husband and my two children, obviously.
Do you have a list of these characters? Like, is there a way
No.
to figure, each Easter egg, or it's kind of like you will have to figure it out as you go?
Well, most of them are like secrets. There's a bunch of cartoonists in there that so those who are sitting at their tables you can find easily because they have their banner,
Right.
like Punto. You know.
Yeah.
Some of them you can't
cone.
know unless I tell you. There's Waldo in there somewhere. I don't know if you looked at it
I still
from
have to
close.
get it.
Okay,
I was
okay.
going to go at it, and I was like, you know what? I want to get the actual thing in front of me and just get.
So this one is
embrace it.
bigger than the print that you bought is bigger than the book, and also I included all of the bleed. So there's parts of the image that are
Wow.
not on the book because they were cut, but
Oh, wow.
I included the whole thing in the print, which is why it's the special edition because it's much bigger. Not only in size, like it's not just bigger than the book. It has like this much drawing on each side
Oh, there
that
you
doesn't
go.
show up at all in the book. What are you doing? The book I'm working on right now, I'm not done yet, but I have to work on a cover at some point.
Right.
And
And how are you gonna beat? Is this also a Boumerie, or is this?
no.
Okay.
No, Boumeries is over for now.
For now.
Except
Volume
for,
10 is the
it's the last one in
It's the
theory.
last
I
one,
might
correct.
come back to it eventually, but
Okay.
I had multiple reasons to stop it. So I
Okay.
decided to let it go and then work on something else. No, I'm doing a graphic novel that's a fiction. It's called The Jellyfish. It's in French,
Okay.
La Méduse.
Okay. Well.
It's going to be published by Édition Pau Pau, which is local, very, very awesome publisher
Okay. Well.
from Montreal. Everything they put out is amazing. I would recommend looking through their catalog. And they have an English branch as well, which is called Pau Pau Press, which has some of their books in
Wow.
English as well. So I'm really thrilled to be published by Pau Pau. And the book is supposed to come out in September if everything goes well.
Wow.
Because I
Okay.
have to finish a book, and also there's a paper shortage. I don't know if you knew about that
Yes.
one.
Yes.
So it makes things more complicated, and then it delays books. So maybe if like
Right.
every book is delayed, maybe mine will be along the way. But then
Wow. Fingers
it's
crossed.
further enough that it's far enough that maybe
It won't be as affected as much.
I
Yeah.
suppose. And looks like we might actually be able to have a normal book launch in a bar setting with like a drink and
Wow.
And then I did one about pregnancy, which is kind of like prettier Boumeries because it's still about stories that, well, it's about pregnancy, so I'm the main character in it.
Right.
Not everything in it is true.
Okay.
I mean, it's
like based off true stories.
it's kind of educational, but in a funny way. It's
Okay.
kind of to make fun of pregnancy, because when you're pregnant, you get all sorts of contradicting advice from everywhere, from like doctors,
Right.
your grandma, or whatever, your neighbor who doesn't even have kids. And this book was my response to that. Even in books, like you get this book from your mother-in-law, which is about like what not to do during pregnancy, and then you get another book that says the exact opposite. And then you're like, well, which one is true? And then your doctor says a completely different thing, and then when you Google it, no, you just find like no one is right. So anyway, so my book is to make fun of that. So it's a bunch of true facts about pregnancy, but in a funny,
quirky kind of way.
Quirky kind of way. I'm the main character kind of because it made sense.
Right.
But so this one is all in watercolor and done, on paper traditionally, and
wow.
It was a process. It was hard to do, and but it's still not fiction. And then the book I'm working on now is inspired from my life, but I basically like took a bunch of my problems and gave them to a fictional character.
Okay.
So so it's called The Jellyfish, and it's about a young woman who has a jellyfish living inside of her eye. So she sees a jellyfish at all times.
Okay.
So it's a metaphor for vision problems, because I have vision problems.
Okay.
I lost an eye.
Oh, wow.
So I'm blind in this eye.
Okay. Wow. That's and you're still able to do like everything that you do. That's amazing. That's great.
Yes. So it's been a year. I lost it a year ago, about
oh wow, and it's recent
March
too.
10th. Yeah, it's recent. So I had to adapt. The first months were strange. I was in the hospital a lot because they were trying to save it. They kept telling me, "Oh, it's gonna come back. It's gonna come back." And it's been a year and it hasn't come back. So I'm not getting my hopes up that it will. If it
but
comes
kudos
back,
to you for adapting so well. Yeah.
It's not as bad as you would think. If you walk around just hiding one eye, the first few days you're gonna bump into things. There are things. I just see it in a funny way now. One of the hardest things for me to do is to put the cap back on a pen.
Oh yeah, okay. I would have never guessed that, but yeah, true.
Because my perception of death is affected.
Right.
And the closer you are to my face, then the harder it is. So then I would like try to put the cap back, but I never quite, and then I just end up drawing on my hand like,
oh man.
And then I need a few tries and then I get it right. But I can draw, I can drive. I bump into walls all the time, but I would do that even when I had two eyes. So ironically, I've been having eye problems for years. Which is why I wrote the script for that book. I signed for the book, and then a week later, I lost my eye. And it looked like a bad joke. And I was in the hospital, and people were asking me what I did for a living. And so I said, I'm a cartoonist. And that's funny, because I'm actually working on a book about eye problems. And this is actually just for research. And the doctors would look at me like, is she kidding? Or like...
it's almost as if there was what do you call it, like you mimicked or you kind of
there's method acting. This is method cartooning.
Yeah, exactly. Once the book is released, pop. But I mean
it's gonna make for an interesting story for sure. It's not on purpose. My cat's in front of the camera. It's not on purpose. I kind of knew I was gonna lose an eye at some point, because doctors would be like, oh, if you ever see, flashes, come back, because then something's happening. And I remember quite clearly about 10 years ago, or even more, probably more, maybe 12, 13, I would walk around hiding one eye, being like, this might happen to me. It's not as bad as it looks. And then it did. But I'm okay. Drawing this book has done wonders for my drawing skills. Actually,
Wow.
I would recommend for any artists watching this video that if you want to get better at drawing, just draw something really long over a very long period of time. Like start a 300-page book, you'll get better, I promise. I don't know, because there's so much work put in it that I've seen my drawing skills but it's just because I felt so. I feel like my drawing was at the same place for so long because
Okay.
I
Like
drew
it plateaued?
Boumeries. Yeah, it plateaued. I feel like, and then this is so radically different from what I've used to draw before that I kind of feel like it opened a bunch of doors. It's just because I've been practicing a lot. So that's true for everything. If you want to it's like that's what I would say. If you started a long project or an animation or anything that makes you draw for a long period of time and
Right.
you work on it every day, you're gonna get better, even if you have one eye. So that's the good ending to this story. People are like, oh, but you can still draw, and then I'm like, but I got so much better too.
No, absolutely. There was
But
at least a payoff.
It's fine.
That's
I'm
that's
fine.
very cool, and we're super excited. We like when this book launches, hopefully again in September. Yeah, we'd be more than happy to shine some light on it, even come back on
Cool.
and just to on a different scale instead of having an interview, maybe just to talk a bit about it.
Hopefully this book, I mean, I'm proud of it so far. I think it's my best book.
Wow, okay.
So far.
Yeah.
It's very different from anything I've done before. So hopefully people think so too.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, we've like you said, we've followed Boumeries for so long, and you always have your core fans, but even then your fan base just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So I wouldn't see why not. And again, much success to the book and much success to you as well, go moving forward. If we want to actually be more involved into your world, where would be the best places or social platforms we should go and see? I've mentioned Instagram. Is there any other places we can go to enjoy your art?
I think the main place is probably my Patreon, because that's where I put everything first. So my patrons get to see everything I make before everyone else. If I do end up putting it on the web anyway, they get oh, I'm working on this children's book. Here's the thumbnails for the cover, like things that I never show anyone else. So, and they get, because it's behind a small, but it's behind a paywall.
Right.
It's just like $1 a month, and then so yeah, work in progress, excerpts from my book. They've seen the production of my whole graphic novel from the start. I was building a pitch. They saw my pitch. They saw the I made a few finished pages for my pitch that are not going to be in the book because the style has changed drastically since. But they saw the pitch. They saw the character designs, my first
behind the scenes
ideas behind the scenes.
Very cool.
Whenever I post an illustration, they're going to see like the thumbnail ideas, the the pencils, the ink, the colors, if any. Sorry. What else? So they get 25% off my prints. So it's I update pretty often, probably twice or 3 times a week.
Okay, wow. That's
so
very active.
I'm very, very active on there. I consider it kind of like my blog. So I am usually also more honest on Patreon than I am anywhere else. So I'm gonna be like, oh, this kind of sucks me to like vague twittering or whatever, bad day, and then I'm gonna go to Patreon and be like, this is why I'm having a bad day.
Yeah, and we'll have all those links in our description, so you can go ahead and follow her in any of the platforms you're more comfortable with. And like she said, if you want a more behind the scenes look, there's her Patreon that has a better view and a better scope. I mean, everything she's mentioned so far, you're definitely getting, a lot more, I would say, exclusive material in this case. So you definitely want to get onto that. So one last thing that we usually ask from any of our artists before we wrap things up is, what is Boum's words of wisdom?
Um, my words of wisdom, like
To
for
any
artists.
Sorry, yes. To any inspiring artists or to anybody who's in the industry right now who's looking to, maybe further or advance themselves, or maybe they're having an off time. What is it that you would suggest from your own experience and, from all these years of drawing? What is the best advice you can give them?
I would probably advise them to start small.
Okay.
Everyone, I mean, I've been there too, especially in my teens, where you're like, I have this really, don't eat my earrings. I have this really huge epic that's gonna be like over 10 books and 800 pages. And no, you're not ready for that. Please don't do that. So I would suggest that you try to do a smaller thing first and see how you find the experience. Like, does the style work for you? The length of the project? Do you have a full-time job or a side job as well that you have, and you have to squeeze your art making time in between, your downtime? So if you do something small and then you finish it, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
As long as it's finished, you're gonna feel better about it, and then you can do better on the next project. And the next one could be longer. But yeah, I think finished, not perfect, might be the words of wisdom. They're not by me though. I mean, it's just a motto that's been passed around. Finished, not perfect. I like to finish things, and I will do better next time. Every project is a learning experience. Do it small, do it the best you can, and then you'll do better, even better for the next one.
Awesome. There you go. And we, before we go, usually we end with a last pun. So is there any last puns you'd like to share with us before we go?
Oh man, I don't know. I should have thought of that before. I'm not good with puns, especially in English, I guess. But you showed my sticker. I've already done.
Oh yeah, exactly. There you go, people. She's done her
Chai
behalf.
guy.
So we got Chai Guy. I mean, hopefully it comes into focus. Anyways, I'll post it up. I mean, again, that was one of the, like, I'm all for puns, and when I saw that right away, I was like, oh, hey, like, we need to connect.
We have to talk.
Exactly. If this is the first time you've been on the channel, we definitely suggest that you hit that subscribe button. If you've enjoyed this episode, we definitely suggest you hit that like button as well. And yeah, as usual, you can always leave a comment, and we always have a nice conversation. You definitely want to hit those links that we've left below for Boumeries and Boum and all of her, future projects. We definitely wish and hope much success for your books, and also to you as well. And yeah, I mean, as usual, guys, take it easy. Peace.